GNASS. Two degenerates, both sides of the border. John Santino, Alex Lacasse. The Great North American Sports Show. Welcome into another edition of GNASS. We're coming at you a little bit late this week, but it's been a long week for both of us. But the good news is, for those of you who missed GNASS, we will have two editions for you this week. Alex, with me as always. How are you doing today, buddy?
Coming to you from quarantine in New Hampshire after a weekend of escapades at a University of Texas football game and Austin city limits. So try and do the social responsible thing, John, which is fundamentally lacking in today's society.
How's the tailgating though? It must be good out in Austin, eh?
Any place with barbecue on site for a football game is right up my alley.
There you go. Hopefully a good game too, because we had some stinkers in the NFL this past week.
Yeah, it was at least entertaining, and at least while my parlay was still active, that definitely made me sweat that out. But that'll be an accounting thing that we take up in a Degenerates Corner later this evening. But yes, so we're coming to you on the evening of October 18th in the year of our Lord 2022. On tonight's episode of GNASS, as the Guardians look like they're toast against the Yankees. John and I will look right ahead to what the most likely ALCS and NLCS matchups will be in the next round of the MLB playoffs. Will the Yankees get to exact their revenge on those cheating Astros? We'll recap the week that was in the NFL. And on bad football, the NFL's epidemic of idiotic head coaching is getting an assist from our sworn enemy on this program, and that's the nerds, John. And John, as you know, is our in-house hockey expert. He'll get you ready for the entire NHL season now that things have just gotten underway in the old hockey barn on our GNASS hockey preview. And as always, we'll wrap up with this week in social media in the aforementioned Degenerates Corner. John, any shot for the Cleveland Guardians to come back in this ALDS Game 5?
I mean, there's always a shot, man, but I don't think so. I mean, Aaron Judge, he started off a little bit slow this postseason, but you know what? He picked it up, and man, this is just, I think it was Josh Naylor the other day with that celebration on Garrett Cole. This feels like karma, man. Aaron Judge with a big bomb to bring it up for the Yanks. I mean,
yeah,
I
didn't have a chance to turn the game on, and I looked up it was 4-0, and I was like, well, that's all she wrote for this one. Yep. I just don't think Cleveland has the horses, and they were a team that needed to kind of play from ahead and control the game from the pitcher's mound. So let's just dive right into the ALCS and NLCS. It looks like we're gonna have a rematch of 2017. The Yankees feel like they're cheated out of this World Series, and this was like their chance to go to that World Series that eluded them in the last decade. So let's start there, John. Who do you like in this matchup, and how do you think this plays out?
Ooh, well, I was actually liking the Astros originally just because of how they were rolling. We know that they have a very, very deep pitching staff, despite the fact that they may lack the star power that they had the last time around. But man, the Yankees, if they like the fact that Aaron Judge is appears to be rolling now after a slow start to the postseason, I have a really tough time betting against them. They have the best lineup, I'd argue, that's left really in the league now that the Dodgers are out. And on top of that, you'd like to think that with Garrett Cole, they have arguably the best pitcher remaining. But I mean, he looked a little rough in his last outing, but we're seeing here that the Yankees do have pitching depth, and I would favor them against Houston just because, to your point, I think the Yankees have the best overall player that's left, and from a hitting perspective, in Aaron Judge. From a pitching perspective, you could argue
Yordan Alvarez is a killer. That man is that man is an absolute killer.
He looks like Big Papi Jr., and he is a beast, to your point. And I think Verlander's having a better year than Cole, but just given the trajectory of where they're at in their careers, I'd like to think Garrett Cole can come out in this one. It's tough though. This is going to be the closest series I think we're going to have, especially compared to what we have on the NL side. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Certainly the Yankees are going to be hungry for this one. This is what since they lost that ALCS in 2017, and then we find out about what the Astros were doing, banging on trash cans after the fact. if the Yankees don't have the motivation to play this ALCS, they have no business winning this World Series. So you got to think they're coming into play. I still like Houston here though, and it goes back to Yordan Alvarez. That series against Seattle could have turned out a lot differently if he didn't hit that walk-off home run in game one. And now Seattle is down 1-0. They're going to have to play 2 games in Seattle regardless. And that, or maybe the Mariners just, could have come out and swept them, I guess, from that point, theoretically. But, we're neither here nor there. And there's this kind of Rasputin too, if you will, John. There's just this undeadness to this Astros team, and I think they get off on being the villain here, and they have plenty of motivation too. They like playing for their manager and Dusty Baker, the one thing that's not on his resume is a World Series championship, and so it's not like the Astros are coming in and they're going to be blindsided by whatever the Yankees throw at them.
No, 100%. And I think one thing too in picking the Yankees, I think we're not giving the Astros enough credit, or we haven't mentioned it in terms of giving the Astros enough credit for basically completely turning over their roster from that trash banging World Series championship team. I mean, I think the only remaining holdovers, it's like what, Jose Altuve, I think,
and Alex Bregman,
and Alex Bregman. I was gonna say was the other one, I think, but yeah, and I think maybe Yuli Gurriel too. But like,
you're right, Gurriel. Yep.
But even then, it's only 3 of the 9 fielding players right now. It's like, to your point, like Yordan Alvarez is the center of their lineup, and Kyle Tucker's are arguably their best position player outside of Altuve and Bregman. So they've completely turned over the roster. Their pitching staff now led by Justin Verlander. I mean, we just got to give them credit for really being able to rebuild in such a quick facet. But yeah, I think star power is going to prevail in this series.
And the Astros have the home field here. I feel like if the Yankees had home field, maybe I'd like the Yankees a little bit more. But having that Game 7 in Houston is versus in Yankee Stadium, that's a big advantage.
Oh, yes and no. I'd like to think, like I was saying, like, to one of the other factors I think that should help the Yankees to a degree is Garrett Cole having played for the Houston Astros previously. So I think there's going to be a little bit, provided that they time their start, so he's the one going in Houston, I think there's going to be a little bit of a familiarity factor there and a little bit of a less. I have to see. I don't even know. Say bye. Well, keep in mind, Alex, the game is still active for the Yankees, so there's no way they've announced who's starting when.
Right, and that's I just want to say Nestor Cortez started today, so theoretically you'd think that Cole would be available to start that game 1, and then hopefully he'd get the ball and you can line him up so he would start 1, 4, and 7.
I think you'd want him starting 1, 4, and 7, but at the same time, given the fact that he did start game 4, I could see it being Frankie Montas. But I mean that's
it would depend on when they start the series.
Yeah, it really depends to the point of like the game, like we were saying, just enters the top of the 9th now as we record. So the Yankees likely winners, but like we were saying,
we will keep you posted as the 9th inning evolves here. They're moving to the top of the 9th right now.
Keep in mind, as a Jays fan and a Red Sox fan, Alex and I are dearly hoping that they blow this series.
Yes. And I don't want the Yankees anywhere near the World Series. And then, hopefully someone, I guess, yeah. So that leads us to the National League, John, where I guess, as fans of AL East rivals of the Yankees, and we don't like the Astros on this program either, them cheating Astros.
Little bastards. Shout out to the LA Kings, by the way. They did like a celebrity lookalikes thing, and they had Jose Altuve and a trash can up on their big board. So shout out to the LA Kings. Get a little golf clap there.
Yes. And so I guess that would leave us pulling for one of the teams in the NLCS. A surprise NLCS matchup, John. Pitting the Philadelphia Phillies, Dave Dombrowski's Phillies, back from the dead, and the San Diego Padres that kind of look like a dysfunctional mess at times this season. But like Joaquin Phoenix, they're still here.
These two teams, I think winning the way they did is what surprised me the most, because it felt like they both rolled to the CS, and the Padres in particular, given
what the Padres did was impressive, given how LA just beat up on them all season.
LA beat up on them all season. You even mentioned it, the gong show that transpired between, it felt like everything that could happen to this team did. And then the whole cloud of Fernando Tatis looming over it. But they managed to prevail. Excuse me. It finally looks like Juan Soto's settling into a degree. And I mean, that is,
It's a really interesting match of the Bryce
yeah.
Harper on one side and the guy who replaced him who won the World Series on the other team.
Exactly. And neither of them plays for the Nationals.
Yes, and neither of them plays for the Washington Nationals anymore.
But I think that we have to favor the Phillies in the series. And my thought process with it, Alex, is the main thing that's prevented the Phillies from taking that next step is health. And I think Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola are just such an underrated 1-2 punch. I think they, like, even though you can argue there may be better overall pitching talent on like a single individual pitcher on any team, Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, it's just so devastating to have them going back to back. And to your point, Bryce Harper is one of the best players in baseball. Never stays healthy, but one of the best players in baseball. And I do favor the Phillies in the series, but I mean, there's something to be said about the Padres vibes. You know, vibes can get you pretty far in most sports, and they're overcoming a not LA, but a Las Vegas Raiders gong show of that. Like, that is the level of gong show they're overcoming. And I have a really tough time picking this one. I'm leaning towards Phillies, man, but I like just the resilience of the Padres. You got to respect that. How about you, Alex?
Absolutely, and I think you can make the argument that Soto's the best player in this series, at least on the field, and I agree with you that. I think we talked about this when we were doing previewing the entire playoff landscape here, that if Nola, like, the reason why the Phillies are going to advance is because Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, they just become these big playoff game pitchers who maybe they're not Hall of Famers, but they can take the ball on any day, and they can be Chris Carpenter and throw a 1-0 shutout against Roy Halladay. So I think it's tough, and I do agree with you that there's something with the Padres to be able to, turn around in a relatively quick series. It's not the 3-gamer, but that we have now, but in a 5-game series, you lose game 1, you rip off three in a row against the Dodgers when the entire world thought that was not possible. And I'm leading the Padres here, and there's maybe they're the 06 Cardinals, a team that just got in and then they got hot. And so, back then Albert Pujols was, arguably the best right-handed player in the game, and right-handed hitter rather. And so, maybe Soto has that in him, and they just, there's just something with that team. Quick note on the Dodgers, John. What frauds! Absolute frauds, the Los Angeles Dodgers, John.
Everything about them. But Alex, really quickly, one last thing on the Padres too. Like, in addition to just Juan Soto star power, Manny Machado and Josh Bell, fantastic players, not given enough credit for the fact that they're on the roster just because of the storylines.
Yeah, Manny Machado's really conducted himself like a professional this year, and there were questions that he could actually do that and lead a team. And I think, he's certainly answered them and rewarded the Padres for signing him to that contract.
Exactly. But just really wanted to shout out Manny Machado because he deserves every bit of credit. But to your point about the Dodgers, holy fuck. Tony Gonsolin, you got your lunch handed to you, son.
Right. And I guess that was, maybe the Dodgers' internal concerns about Gonsolin, whether, it was a little bit smoke and mirrors, all his success this year. And it just, again, like, where I was with this team, they needed to win another World Series to validate that pandemic World Series. Otherwise, they're at best, given this run of success that they've had, what they're at the 10-11 straight division championships. They're the 90s Braves. At best case scenario, the 90s Braves. You have all that success. You dominate your division. You win one World Series. Yeah.
It's not just that. It's the fact too, like, in addition to all the success, it almost feels like every time a player becomes available, who's in on them? The LA Dodgers. Who ends up getting them? 9 times out of 10, the LA Dodgers. And they've built what appears to be a team just laden with all-stars. And if you
just a factory of a player development operation.
Exactly. And you've been producing pitchers nonstop. Like, there is no excuse for you not to advance. This should have been your World Series to lose. And yeah, man, like,
yep, they didn't even get there.
Not even close. And I mean, a part of me is smiling because even though Freddie Freeman's Canadian, I really wanted him to stay with the Braves. So part of me is smiling that they didn't win. But I mean, yeah, if you're the Dodgers, like, where do you go from here, really? And I mean, they struck out on Juan Soto because he's with the Padres, and you got to be thinking that they're looking at an upgrade along those lines, maybe even a Shohei Ohtani if he becomes available. But I mean, they're basically baseball's Maple Leafs.
They're again definitely getting there.
They're trending dangerously in that direction.
And we'll get John's thought on his Maple Leafs
Had
as
to
we
make a shout out.
later when we get to the hockey preview. But John, what stuck out to you around the NFL this weekend?
So I wanted to give my first shout out of the weekend to, of course, the Cleveland Browns for getting waxed, but more importantly, Myles Garrett, because he hilariously became their all. Well, it's not hilarious. He's a fantastic player, but I mean hilarious because it just seemed very Browns to get hammered. And then he's their all-time defensive sack leader.
Yeah, he passed Clay Matthews Sr. and
I believe 62.5 sacks. But
yeah, and I mean to get there that quickly, I mean he's still really early on in his career. So
Garrett's a fantastic player. He's gonna destroy every record.
Dude can play for me. Yeah, dude can play for me any day. So you brought up these weird kind of loser stats. Bailey Zappi, all across New England, John. Everybody's getting Zappi fever, and he's the only quarterback, not Tom Brady, not Peyton Manning, not Aaron Rodgers, not Dan Marino, not
Cooper
Montana, Rush, not even Cooper Rush. He's the only quarterback in NFL history to post a quarterback rating of 100 or more in his first 2 NFL starts. So I think this validates, long before the season started, John, I said that, Mac Jones is nothing special. Like, you're lucky if he tops out as a, top, he gets to maybe the 12th best quarterback in the league. Like the delta between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi is less than the delta between Mac Jones and what I would consider a star level NFL quarterback.
That's totally fair. I think Mac Jones will end up being a solid game manager. I think he'll be able to carve out a fine career. I think the biggest issue though is that the way that New England is designed these days, they need an elite QB, and he is not that. And I think because of that, he's gonna not maybe right away, but eventually find his way onto another team.
Right. Yeah. And I think he's getting pretty soured on the Belichick experience. And,
I can't imagine Belichick rubs a lot of players the right way, especially given the fact that in today's,
and he hates quarterbacks.
Exactly. And he openly like he didn't want to play Tom Brady to start off with even. And like
the guy thinks he can win a Super Bowl with Andy Dalton.
Fair point. And yeah, in today's day and age, like you got to be a player's coach to a degree. And Bill is not.
Yeah, I mean, I think Belichick he gets off on winning with a fourth round pick, and like, well, at least I don't need no spoiled brat in the first round. I can just give me a guy in the 6th and or the 5th. I'll just wait around, see what we got, and that'll be fine.
Alex, but that wraps up what we saw this past weekend. Well, to a degree, there is something we're going to cover about yesterday night's Monday night tire fire. But Alex, what do you got to look ahead to this weekend?
So at least for me, and this will lead us into bad football because this team's head coach is, he's going to draw my ear in our bad football segment. But the Chargers really need to get a win at home, and they barely hung on against a Broncos team that is an absolute dumpster fire, as we found out under the leadership of Nathaniel Hackett. So the Chargers need to keep pace with the Chiefs, and the Raiders haven't been up to the task this year. So the Raiders need to keep pace in the division. So the games look pretty mediocre this week, but the one I do have circled is probably Seahawks Chargers. What do you got your eye on, John?
Ooh, for me, I am actually looking for a very different reason, and we will get to it in Degenerates Corner. But I am looking at the Giants game this week because they are dogs headed into Jacksonville, Alex. And on Degenerates Corner, we love our dogs, man. We love them.
Yes, and I mean, kudos to Brian Daboll, who finally looks like he has a clue as a head coach in New York. So there's a little bit of football renaissance going on down there.
It is exciting to watch, despite the fact that they don't have all the pieces in place. But I think one thing that Brian Daboll shows is the value of solid coaching in the NFL.
Yes, and that brings us to this bad football segment, John, because
Can we
Oh,
name
sorry.
it
Go ahead.
after? Oh, I was gonna say, can we just name it after Nathaniel Hackett already?
Yeah, this is going to be when Nathaniel Hackett officially gets fired. This will be named in memorial to the man who, despite his best efforts, can't coach a football team. But that's not where I want to start with bad football, John, because this is just a whole league-wide problem of these idiot head coaches who, like, look, I get it, and who are now they're deferring to the nerds, which I thought football players beat up nerds, and there was no place for these people in the game. Oh, how contraire, John.
So what I find odd is not that they are listening to analytics, but Alex, the
Oh,
definition of
sorry, quick interruption. Final in the Bronx. Yankees 5-1 winners in Game 5.
There we go.
Moving on to play the Astros in the American League Championship Series. Sorry, apologies for the interruption.
No, not a problem at all. We got to give live updates when they happen. But no, what I find odd is not that they're listening to analytics. We've seen the analytics renaissance happen in many sports. It's the definition of insanity is to do something over and over again and expect a different result. How many of these coaches do we see consistently make the same bad decisions, whether it be on fourth down play call? Like always, generally it happens on these fourth down plays, but this is getting ridiculous.
Right. For starters, on 4th and 1, like these coaches, like just a reminder, if you don't pick it up, you turn over the ball. So
like
now
the
that
other guys,
now that we've clarified this point, when these teams they're inside the 30, they've been struggling to gain anything on offense, but they finally get down there. They get to 4th and short. All right, so you made the decision to go for it. So you just can't line up and get a yard, put your quarterback under center. No. We got to put him in the shotgun. So all right, let's start him 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So then, all right, which it's still take the freaking points. None of these, if there's anything that the NFL has shown us that other than Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, when they were humming along, doing their thing with the greatest quarterback of all time, and they, 9 times out of 10, they're going to pick it up because their execution is just at a near flawless level. Don't go for it. Take the fucking points. And I pardon my French, John. I really know this is a family program. It's just maddening. In some of these coaches, Nathaniel Hackett, we would not be laughing at him every week if he just freaking kicked. He has a kicker with a great freaking leg. If he had just taken, if you just
fair, we would be laughing at Nathaniel Hackett a bit because he does things like forget the punt team. So we'd laugh at him for wildly different reasons. But to your point, score the goddamn points. There are so many situations in the NFL where if you try to make how many times does a team bet that the other coach is incompetent and win the game because of that? Because right. You have to force the other team, even if you say get a touchback, you have to force them to go 75 yards and score points.
I say this a million times. You have to learn to not lose in the NFL before you learn how to win. And you can make the playoffs by just not doing stupid things to lose football games. And because there's another team run by a more incompetent boob than you are who will puke on themselves, and that's good for 4 or 5 wins a year.
Just ask Broncos Nation how many timeouts Nathaniel Hackett's burned through just because he can't count to 25.
Or 11.
Or really he doesn't even have to count. He all he has to do is watch the play clock.
Yeah, so that's why I had the Chargers game circled, because Brandon Staley, the Chargers, they wouldn't have had to sweat off that game or even go to overtime if he had just freaking kicked the field goal. I mean, I know the kicker was hurt, so there's a little bit of extenuating circumstances, but unless that kicker's leg is sawed off, or a blimp landed on it, run out there and make a kick.
How
it's the NFL.
Far out was the field goal? Was it over 50 yards?
The game winner was, I think it was a 40 something, 43 yard kick. And
that's my point.
You had a sore hamstring, you still made the kick.
My point is, if you're in the NFL, and yes, I get you're injured, can't perform. That's okay. If you're in the NFL, if it's under 45 yards, you should be relatively automatic. That's why you're there.
Yes. There's zero excuse to miss a kick inside 45 yards.
Did it get blocked?
Unless it's a monsoon.
Yeah, did
But
it get blocked? Like, is it a hurricane? Like, I'm confused. Like, you should be hitting that kick.
yeah.
That's why you're there, buddy.
Yep. So, because I think Brandon Staley, he might be the next coach to get fired before Nathaniel Hackett, and then
He's
after he goes, because he's very close to losing that team, then Nathaniel Hackett has no one else to look at.
Brandon Staley is doing a very good job of fucking up like Justin Herbert
Yep.
pretty easily. Like it's like, dude, this should be easy for you to at least lead your team to like a 10-7 record. And it's like he can't do it. Like he's proving he can't do it. He
Can't
could
do it.
call the plays off of Madden and lead that team to a 10-7 record, and he still can't do it.
Yeah. So one last quick storyline out of the NFL, John. Russell Wilson, he's getting an MRI. He might have a serious hamstring injury. Is this guy done? This has been a precipitous drop.
I actually think a bigger issue with him in terms of his steep decline is like it's one thing if your play is declining, that happens. Father time's undefeated. If that's happening though, and your teammates fucking hate your guts, that's a bigger problem. And that appears to be the story that's developing in Denver, is that he just doesn't appear to dude, if you're a douche to your teammates, like they're not gonna like you. And he appears like some of the stories, some of the things that are coming out about like Russell Wilson's time in Seattle, his time here in Denver, like, dude, you need your offensive line to protect you. Like,
Especially when you've lost a step. And
yeah,
it looks
and that's my point. Is it looks like he can't like he was never gonna last a long time given his stature and the fact that he needs to like run around behind the line of scrimmage and like create plays like by extending the play. And it's you lose a step in that your teammates hate you and they're not doing that extra mile to block for you, you're screwed.
there's been a few too many instances, especially this year, and I feel like it definitely started last year, of guys just screaming through the defensive line and just running through Russell Wilson. And he's taken a lot of bad hits, and you saw with, I mean, not that they're identical players, but they were both very mobile quarterbacks. Like when Cam Newton got hit too many times, like that was it. And he never got it back. Even, like he never got close to that 2015 season, but even, once it was gone, it was gone. And he didn't really have he wasn't the best passer from the pocket to like fall back on.
No, and in addition to that, like, so Russell Wilson is like one of the most like dating back to his time in Seattle, he was always one of the most sacked QBs. He's actually this season, it appears like he would be on pace to breaking every record of him getting sacked. So that is like to your point, Alex, like he's getting older, not younger, and that is just going to make that process substantially worse. I mean, it's oh
Well,
sorry.
I was gonna say, eat your hearts out, Denver. I'm sure you're gonna love that trade. As much as you love this trade now, you're gonna love it even more next season. But that's enough of bad football, John. We don't want to leave too bad of a taste in our mouths, because we're
We
moving
can talk
into
about bad football forever.
we're moving into the winter sport, near and dear to your heart, and all of our friends to the Great White North up in Canada's heart. It's time to sharpen up those skates. We're going to tape up the old hockey stick. We're going to drive our Zamboni out onto the ice at the old barn. And John, how about we get to the NHL preview? What say you?
Oof, we can jump into it real quick. I mean, technically the season has started, so we're not gonna give a full run through, but I think we can talk about a few things here and there, don't you think?
Yeah, well, let's just take a look at kind of the big pictures. We'll take a quick spin around the whole circuit here. We'll start in the Eastern Conference. John, who you like winning the Atlantic Division?
Ooh, the Atlantic Division, the one near and dear to our hearts. The most competitive division in hockey. They had 3 of the top 5 or 6 teams in the league last year. I'm not quite sure exactly where Tampa finished. I believe they're like 6th or 7th at the lowest, but very close to the top 5. Obviously, the Stanley Cup finalist, Tampa Bay. This division does not get any weaker. The teams at the bottom, the Sabres, the Senators, the Red Wings, all of them have improved with the exception of the Montreal Canadiens. And I would argue they've improved as well. It's just that they are in that suck hard for Bedard mode with generational talent, Connor Bedard available to draft. Like I was saying, this is the most competitive division in hockey, but at the same time, the top end of the division is one of the best in hockey. And I think because of that, this is the Maple Leafs division to lose. The big question mark with the Maple Leafs is two things: the expiring contract of the GM Kyle Dubas, which if he leaves, it's possible they blow up the roster at the end of the year, and he could leave even if they win the Stanley Cup because his contract's expiring. And what happens in goal? The Leafs brought in Ilya Samsonov and Matt Murray. Um, they had awful goaltending last year, sub 900 with the exception of 1 month of the season. And because of that, I don't think it's going to deter them this year. And I think it's their division to lose. I actually think the Leafs win the President's Trophy despite having shitty goaltending. And of course, the shitty goaltending will come back to bite them in round one of the playoffs. But I see the Leafs winning this division. Other than that, I think it plays out very similarly to last year. So I think the Panthers and Lightning battle it out for 2 and 3, and I think Boston gets that final playoff spot. Just because I don't think the Atlantic will get 2 wild cards.
Sure, you mentioned the President's Trophy. Florida obviously won the President's Trophy last year.
Yes.
Was that just a case of, was that a more of a flash in the pan? Do they have some staying power, and do you think they're comfortable too, or do the Bruins, after bringing back David Krejci from the Czech Republic, bringing back Patrice Bergeron when some people thought he might retire, or hell, even go to the hated Montreal Canadiens? Do you think that they're locked for that number 2 seed? Do you think that they'll actually be challenging the Leafs, or do you think the Bruins can break into that spot?
I think the Bruins are the hardest team to predict in this because they are missing Charlie McAvoy and Brad Marchand for such a substantial amount of time. But to your point, David Krejci has come back and looked like he hasn't missed a beat. Patrice Bergeron is still Patrice Bergeron. He's always going to be one of the best defensive forwards in hockey, even though he's aging. And with the Panthers, for me, it's not that they're a bad team. They're going to be one of these teams that if you look at how they're constructed, I think they're from year to year, it's going to be like go for it, then take a break. Because they traded a shitload of draft picks last year, ended up going over the cap, and then had to trade Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. Yes, they got Matthew Tkachuk in return, but the reason they had to trade both of those players is because they were very, very far over the cap. And that being said, I think this is going to be a year where they take a step back. Not a very big one, because keep in mind this was like a 120 point team last year. So a step back for them to like 100 points is still in the playoff picture.
And we'll talk a little bit. So you're already a little bit down on the Maple Leafs, John. They really almost had that against Tampa last year, and then I thought they were poised to go on a run. But we'll break down the playoffs in a bit. We'll switch over to the Metropolitan Division. What are your thoughts there? Who wins this when the dust settles in April?
I'm all in. So I know a lot of people love the Rangers. I think this is going to be a 1-2 battle between the Rangers and Hurricanes. I think the Hurricanes win the division. The Hurricanes basically acquired Brent Burns and Max Pacioretty for nothing, and they were already pretty much the team to beat in that division. So I think that will really push them over the top and allow them to win this division. But the Rangers, and we'll talk about it a bit later, could be players in the Patrick Kane sweepstakes. I actually think they might be able to get the best package together for him. And Patrick Kane is the kind of player that could swing this division, but we got to work with what they have. And that being said, the Rangers have the best goalie, arguably on earth right now, in Igor Shesterkin. I think they finished second. I think the Hurricanes finished first. And then I think it's rounded out actually by the Penguins. And then I think the fourth spot is where it gets interesting. And this is why I don't think the Atlantic will get 2 wild cards. I think the Islanders I think they're the team to watch, man. They really struggled last season, starting out primarily on the road last year. We just saw them hand out a big contract to Matt Barzal. Like, I think this could be a big bounce back year for them now that they are really going to be more balanced in terms of their scheduling. And the Capitals have started out really slow and look old as shit. So, not that age slows you down entirely in the standings, but I think because of that, the Islanders will get the edge and get that final playoff spot. And
sure, you mentioned Shesterkin with the Rangers being the best goalie. I believe he won the MVP.
He won the Vezina last year.
So yeah, he won the Vezina. Do you think with these new additions on the Hurricanes, that takes them a little bit of time to incorporate, and maybe the Rangers get some distance between them, that between now and the end of the season, and it's a little bit too much ground for the Hurricanes to make up and win this division? Or you think that Carolina will get everything together? And
I think Carolina will get it together, and they are without Max Pacioretty for a few months. He got injured training in the offseason, but I just think like they literally got these players for nothing. It's a straight improvement, despite the fact that they acquired 2 of the best players in hockey. They are older, but at the same time, like it's hard to see a team that acquired Brent Burns for nothing getting worse. And I think that until the Rangers basically counter them and acquire, like, I really think they're the team that's going to acquire Patrick Kane. And we'll talk about the 4 potential fits for him in a second. But ultimately, like, until they make that kind of push, I think the Rangers are just going to be like one step behind the Hurricanes right at this time. Alex, let's take a quick break and then we'll jump into the Western Conference.
And we're back with the GNASS hockey preview. We'll switch over to the Western Conference. John, who you like in the Central Division?
The Central is the division that is really, like, their teams are most trying hard to suck for Connor Bedard. Like, the Blackhawks and Coyotes are basically trading anyone that knows how to play hockey. To the point about Patrick Kane, he's openly looking for a trade. Like, his agent's been kind of calling teams left and right. The 4 teams that have emerged as fits for him: Calgary, LA Kings, New York Rangers, and Pittsburgh Penguins. I think his best fits Calgary, but as I mentioned, I think New York makes the push and ultimately gets him. We'll dive into why I think that in a little bit. But to that point, I think that the Blackhawks and Coyotes are non-factors. I think the Jets are going to realize about halfway through the year that they suck, and then also join them in tanking for Bedard. So that's 3 teams that basically everyone's going to be picking up easy wins against.
And sure, you just want to remind everyone how the NHL lottery works for getting that top pick?
Yes. So basically, any team that does not make the playoffs is involved in the lottery for the top pick. The teams that are the worst have the highest weighted average. So if you're the worst team in the league, you have the highest % chance of getting first pick.
And it's not like the NBA where it's like a flat odds for like the bottom 3 or 4 teams, yeah?
No, not flat odds for the bottom 3 teams. It's weighted, so it's the bottom 4 teams have a chance at 1, whereas but they did technically expand it. So it's a whole thing where they lottery off basically the top 3 picks to everyone who didn't make the playoffs. So it's like, it used to be 1, but now it's the top 3. And then, like I said, weighted depending on how bad you are in the standings. That being said, so we have 4 non-factors in or 3 non-factors in the Central Division. I actually think the team that's going to take the biggest step back, and I had this before the year, unfortunately we couldn't record that, was the Minnesota Wild. They're facing a $15 million cap penalty because they bought out Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. So I think they're kind of fucked for the next couple seasons, despite the fact that they have Kirill Kaprizov and one of the most exciting young cores in hockey. And that being said, that leaves us with 4 teams to make the playoffs: Stars, Predators, the Blues, and the reigning champion Avalanche. I think the Avalanche win the division just because even though they've lost Nazem Kadri, I still think they're the strongest team. And to the point that I just made, I think 4 teams are virtually non-factors.
And last but not least, we're going to go to the left coast. John, who wins the Pacific?
So the Pacific is the second hardest division that's trying to suck hard for Bedard. The Kraken, Ducks, Sharks, and you could argue to a degree the Canucks are going to be basically non-factors. I actually think Calgary wins this division. Calgary is a strong team. I think they're the best fit, like I mentioned, for Patrick Kane because this. They have Daryl Sutter, their coach, has made them a hard-nosed physical defense. With the way that they're built on offense is their centers are extremely defensively responsible and their wingers are electrifying and can create plays. And that's why I think Patrick Kane fits in perfectly on this team. I don't think they'll end up getting him because they didn't go all in for Jack Eichel, who's a younger he's a younger player who plays a more premium position. So I think they ultimately will not get Patrick Kane, but I do think they do make a trade at the deadline to put them over the top. And I think this division is theirs to lose. That being said, I think the Golden Knights, the Oilers, and the Kings make the playoffs.
Alrighty, and so you have the Flames winning this division. They lost the Battle of Alberta, though.
They got hammered in the playoffs last year.
Which is like that's even. I feel like they'd rather miss the playoffs up there than lose to the hated Oilers. So I do want to start with the Oilers there. Connor McDavid is considered widely the best player in hockey. So why hasn't he gotten over the hump? And do you think? And I guess we'll dive into who you think is going to go on a big run here in the playoffs. Can he lead the Oilers to a Stanley Cup final?
Yes. He proved it last year in the playoffs, just putting up absolute video game numbers. I think the biggest problem that he's going to face is team construction around him. It started off with a horrible GM in Peter Chiarelli, And now it's just kind of continuing with the second iteration
You
under
mean
Ken
Stanley Cup winning general
Stanley
manager
Cup
Peter Chiarelli?
champion Peter Chiarelli. But yeah, but it's kind of continued ironically with another Stanley Cup champion in Kenny Holland. And Kenny Holland's done a better job building around Connor McDavid, but at the same time, it just feels like the acquisitions they're making are not like it's bringing them closer, but it's not enough to push them over the top and beat the elite teams out, whether it's out west or even in the east. Like defensively, the Oilers are really not a strong enough unit. And I think where they're going to find the biggest problem is in net. Last season, Jack Campbell was brutal for the Maple Leafs, with the exception of the playoffs and 1 month of the season. And even in the playoffs, you could argue he had moments where he was not great. And the Oilers handed him a big contract and are really expecting him to be an elite number one goaltender. And I don't think I don't even think it's an issue of talent. I think he's a split starting goaltender who has durability issues. And that being said, by the time the postseason rolls around, I just don't think he's going to have enough juice to get it done for them. And Connor McDavid might be able to still continually put up 2-3 points a game with Leon Draisaitl, but if you're letting in 4 or 5, you're not going to win the series. And
Yeah,
that's where I think they're going to run into problems.
the fossil of Mike Smith. They might have done better with like the goalie pad
Exactly.
up there against the Avalanche. And so speaking of those Avalanche, last year's Stanley Cup winner, they get over that hump. They were knocking at the door as a playoff team, but suffering these really big defeats. And then they finally win it last year, led by Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar.
And then McKinnon promptly became the highest paid player in hockey.
Yes, by 100K
100 grand.
over his rival McDavid there, and I'm sure they're somewhat
And
friendly with
then
each other.
my boy Matthews, when he signs his 1 year deal in Toronto, is going to smash that. So
Yes, so when you look at you mentioned that the Avalanche lost Nazem Kadri. Do you think this team is still stacked enough to go on a run and potentially repeat?
I do. I think that natural progression of players like Alex Newhook and some of their younger guys is what's going to really push them over the top. And in addition to that, we even saw, like, for example, like some of their more role player S type guys like Valerie Nikushkin step up. And I think, like I said, natural progression of those guys is going to sustain them. And I really think Joe Sakic has found, like, really, he knows what to add to the team at the right time. Like, we saw him make just really, really excellent additions, like ones that maybe they didn't have that like kind of name appeal, like guys like Josh Manson, Arturi Lehkonen. Like, these are guys who, they're not sexy names, but they play physical, aggressive hockey, and that's the kind of hockey that makes you tough to play against in the playoffs and wins you those real, like, tight knit overtime type, like tight checking playoff games. And I really do think that Colorado and Calgary, I think, are destined to meet in the Western Conference Final, and I hope they meet in the Western Conference Final. If it's not Calgary, I hope it's Edmonton because I like high scoring affairs. But,
Yeah,
but but I do think that we are looking at a Calgary Colorado Western Conference Final. I think Calgary's got the edge right now. I mean, this is very early, so keep in mind, like, I do
and
expect
they're the Calgary Flames, John.
Yes, and they are the Calgary Flames without Jerome McGinley, so that
Yes,
does pose some problems.
We all know what Jerome McGinley did to will that team to the Stanley Cup final, and they were a bad call short of winning the damn thing.
Yeah. But
So,
sorry,
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, but that being said, I do think they are destined for the Western Conference Finals, but I think Colorado edges them out.
Certainly, and why don't we get your Eastern Conference final pick, and why don't you give us your way too early Stanley Cup winner, John?
I have a really hard time, despite the fact that I think this is the best Maple Leafs roster that's ever been put together in my lifetime. I have a really tough time picking them, just because, like, they lost to fucking Arizona last night. Like, they just find ways to lose, and that's like their thing right now. And until they show me some resilience, I can't pick them. I even think they might lose in the first round if they don't finish in first. That being said, I have Carolina winning the East. I think that we're destined for a Carolina Colorado Stanley Cup final, and I think Carolina wins.
That's real. That's Gary. That Gary Bettman's all over that. That's a perfect Gary Bettman Stanley Cup final there.
He's definitely feeling that one. I think that Carolina, what's funny with all these teams that we're talking about, they all have like Colorado even had it too until they won last year, like these choky sort of vibes about them, like Toronto, Calgary, Carolina, like I said, Colorado basically had that MO until they won last year. But I mean, so is life these days, my friend. But fingers crossed for the Leafs. But like I said, I think it's going to be a Carolina win over Colorado in the Cup final. What about you, Alex? Who do you have?
So, I'm not Mr. Hockey, as which all of our listeners in Canada probably know by now. But I like where the Rangers were going into last season. You have the best goalie on the planet, as we've talked about. So, and unlike you, I'm not scarred by years of Toronto playoff losses. There was that really funny one in 2013 when the Bruins pulled a rabbit out of their hat. And I did see a tweet. Sorry, dude, I'm just twisting. I'm gonna keep twisting the
Yeah,
knife, John. But they said 8-1 was the new 3-0 in Toronto, and I was like, ooh,
I know.
that's
They really are the same cut of cloth, those fuckers, aren't they?
But John, I think the Maple Leafs win a playoff round this year. I think even think they win 2 rounds, but I think the Rangers going to get them in the Eastern Conference Finals. So I'll give me the Rangers in the Cup Finals, and I think Colorado gets back. They did lose Nazem Kadri. There's something about these Canadian teams, and there's just they're a piece short. Oh, and I thought when Duncan Keith went to Edmonton, he was really going to be a difference maker. Bring that Stanley Cup pedigree, bring that puck mover on the blue line, and it just didn't work. And he was a little bit over the hill. And so I just it's tough for me to pick a Edmonton or Calgary. I mean, if I had to pick one of those Canadian teams, I'd probably pick Calgary, but I think Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar, they proved that
Yeah.
they're two of the best offensive players in hockey, and that Cale Makar, we've talked about him, when we were, air checking the show, John. He's only doing things that guys like Bobby Orr did
Yep.
from the blue
He's
line.
the best defenseman in hockey, and it's not close. Like not even remotely close. And
So I just think now that they've broken through, I think the Avs are kind of poised for this kind of lightning run. They might not win 3 of them, or they might not win back to back, but they're going to be right there in the hunt, and it's theirs until they lose it. And I think that's why I would take the Avs over the Rangers right now.
Range, I like that. I like that cup final too. It's tough. It's really between like those like 4 or 5 teams, and it's like I think this is going to be a year that it's really like we're going to see a big deadline trade that makes a huge difference. Like whether it's Jake Chikrin, whether it's Patrick Kane, like I think one of those guys is going to join one of these teams, and really that's what's going to put them over the top. Because
So
it's
yeah, that is what I wanted to ask you about. So speaking of, we talked about Patrick Kane a lot as being a trade target. He's until Austin Matthews came on the scene, he was widely considered the best American hockey player who has entered the league. He has 3 Stanley Cups to his name. He scored the game-winning goal in the first one.
still a near 100-point player.
Yeah. So what does he have to give a team, and who are you looking at as you mentioned the Rangers might be a good candidate to get him, but who else might be in on Kane, and will he be a piece that puts them over the top? And then I guess other guys as well that you think will be real difference makers come the deadline that gives, one of these teams in the hunt, the real edge here.
So there's 4 real teams that have emerged for Patrick Kane. That would be LA, Calgary, New York, and Pittsburgh. I think the best fit for him, like I mentioned, is Calgary, just because they're already a rugged team that they really have that base from like their centers, Nazem Kadri, Elias Lindholm, and Michael Backlund. Very, very astute defensive players, very, very good. Like they can play any style of game. They can play against anyone's top 6. And the way that Calgary's wingers are set up with Andrew Mangiapane, Jonathan Huberdeau, Tyler Toffoli, Patrick Kane would slide right in and fit like a glove in that top 6. His play style really complements it. Like I said, Jonathan Huberdeau, one of the best playmakers in hockey. Patrick Kane, one of the best point producers in hockey. 240 goal scorers in Elias Lindholm and Andrew Mangiapane. I mean, Mangiapane, I guess, was 36 last year, but either way, it has all the pieces there for Kane to be super effective. And he can, with the fact that the centers are so defensively sound, he can float around and play. So I think that's the best fit for him. Who I think actually gets him is the New York Rangers. For all the reasons that we talked about. They are such a complete team, and they're really just missing that one piece to put them over the top. And if Kane is available, especially at a discounted rate, with say like Chicago eating half of his contract and potentially being available for like a prospect and a first round pick, that's the kind of trade that screams New York Rangers, especially given the fact that they have enough cap room to give him a contract extension.
And who do you think would go the other way from the Rangers prospect if some of their guys are really highly sought after?
Ooh, that's a tough one because if I am Chicago, I would even debate going the route of potentially asking for a member of the kid line, like an Alex Lafreniere and a first round pick, just straight up. That would be the route that I would go if I'm Kyle Davidson and I'm running the Chicago Blackhawks. I think that there should be enough interest in Patrick Kane, especially if they eat half his contract to get a haul similar to that. And if it's not Alexis Lafreniere, I expect a young roster player, a team's top 5 prospect, and a first round pick, kind of like the standard for an elite player. It,
Definitely. And any other guys that you think would be difference makers that are likely to get moved?
One, and he's already demanded a trade, which is Jacob Chikrin of the Arizona Coyotes. He doesn't want to play in front of 2,000 fans at Arizona State's practice facility. Neither would I. A few seasons ago, he was arguably the best defenseman from an analytics perspective in all of the sport. He's a goal scoring machine either way, and he plays an extremely physical style. He would really be a good fit for any team that needs a defenseman. And the good news about him is his cap hit is so low that pretty much the entire league can afford to trade for him. So I actually think what's happened to him is because he's been injured so much in the last year or two, he's kind of fallen out of people's favor in the sense that the original asking price for him was a prospect and 2 first round picks, is what it was believed. And I don't think anyone's going to meet that period. They're just because if you're going to pay that much, you might as well just get someone who's available to play now, as opposed to someone who's on LTIR. But that being said, I think Chikrin is the kind of player that can step in and make a monstrous difference because he can come in, play 22, 23 minutes a night, play an extremely physical style, and he can be the quarterback and number 1 shooter on your power play.
Alrighty, and kind of like the NBA, which will have our full NBA preview show out later this week. So make sure you stay tuned right here on GNASS. Just like the NBA, there is a superstar, once in a generation prospect that the league has wants to dig their claws into and suck real hard for, John.
Yep, suck hard for Connor Bedard. As we've tried to mention it as going through the divisional previews, there's going to hit a point this year, probably around American Thanksgiving or Christmas, where a bunch of teams are just going to start offloading assets. And that's really why I think the trade deadline is going to be key for the Stanley Cup this year. Connor Bedard is an elite player. He plays right winger center. He scored 4 goals in his first World Junior appearance. He has 2 points a game right now at the junior level. We're looking at basically the kind of guy who can step in and within a year or two be a 40 goal player and a point per game player. And like I said, from the center ice position too, which is just something that you don't see very often. And that's the bare minimum of what he can be. So, I mean, like I said, we're going to see a lot of teams start selling off assets. We already have a bunch of contenders for him, those being the Habs, the Coyotes, the Kraken, and the Blackhawks. They're literally trading anyone who can do a crossover correctly. So I fully expect about halfway through the year for them to be joined by some other teams as they slowly fall out. Those, of course, primarily being the Philadelphia Flyers, who, I mean, if John Tortorella can't turn this around quickly, they're going to be selling off assets. And the San Jose Sharks. San Jose's brutal team in rebuild.
Sure, and if there was ulterior motives, let's say within the league office, and let's say they wanted to engineer who might get this once in a generation player, we don't want to necessarily encourage or suggest that this is what's happening, but I guess who would be your bag job pick? Remember when the Lakers ended up in the top 3 out of nowhere? I think they went up from like the 8th seed so they could get, I think, one of Lonzo Ball, Jason Tatum, or Markelle Fultz, and it's like, how that happened. Who would you make that narrative for?
So the obvious pick is Arizona because they appear to be bankrupt and they're playing at the Arizona State arena.
That would be very Gary Bettman.
That'd be the very obvious pick. The other one is the Chicago Blackhawks. They're a team that's dealt with basically, like, you see the logo there, but just like the litany of off ice issues in the last year or so. And they are a brutal team in one of the biggest markets in hockey. And they've even made some brutal missteps in their rebuild. So that would be a team that Gary Bettman would also like to quickly get a reboot on and get like kind of like a new media flavor, if you will, given like the fact that like they had the whole Kyle Beach incident, the Akeem Alou thing happened under their watch. Like this is just an organization that's been shrouded in doubt, really, and that would be the other one besides Arizona that could really use a facelift.
All righty. Well, you heard it here first. Everyone's turning in. Everyone's really listening to that segment just so until I got my Stanley Cup pick out. So Avalanche it is, and John, you're also on the Avs, right?
Oh yeah, we both
All
got
right.
the Avs. Just you got Rangers, I got Hurricanes. So we're both Metro versus Avs.
And
Alex,
yeah, that
go ahead,
wraps
man.
up the GNASS hockey preview. And so we'll dive right into this week in social media, John.
Yes, we will. And my this week in social media shout out, actually shouting out this is a or it's this is a Foolaman on Twitter. He gave us a nice little graphic that displays the Leafs winning percentage against awful teams, and that is a big shout out to those of us who bet the Arizona Coyotes last night at plus 450. We were big winners as the Leafs classically choked this game away. So shout out to my boys in blue for making me a richer man. Alex, what is your social media shout out this week?
I mean, he's kind of a punching bag on this show, but we're going back to the
Going to the well.
Going back to the well. Our friend here at Bumpers Kyle. Guess he's a Broncos fan. He said, "Did someone please tell Nathaniel Hackett it's not possible for him to tank for Victor Wembanyama?" Victor Wembanyama, obviously the NBA prospect who is a literal unicorn at 7'4". And makes it with Steph Curry range, and so I think Victor Wembanyama might be the only person in the world that can help out a poor Nathaniel Hackett.
I think he's beyond help.
Yeah, he might need to be updating that resume real soon. And that will lead us right into Generous Corner, John.
Sometimes she goes, sometimes it does. She didn't go. That's the way she goes.
Come on, 22 black, 22 black, 22 black. Son of a bitch.
Fucking way she goes, he said.
Oh, no. Why did I bet the company payroll? Oh, Gil's in a lot of trouble.
Can the boys beat the number? We'll find out on Degenerate's Corner.
It's the way she goes, buddy. Fucking way she goes.
Our favorite segment of the show, Alex. So it's been a little bit. I believe we have slightly over a week since our last show. Alex, did you have any winners from our last time around?
I did, John. These teaser bets, now that we've righted the ship.
There we go, buddy.
That we hit last week. The Giants were in London. They won the game outright, but we got them at plus 13.5. Niners just had to win over the Panthers, and the Jets going up against the Dolphins, a third string quarterback, again, won outright. The Jets, look, there's a little bit of football renaissance going on in New York.
The Jets I was about to say the Jets are rolling, the Giants are rolling. New York is a place to be for football right now.
And just for accounting purposes, John, how'd your best bet do last week?
My best bet was a shout out for a long shot, which is Austin
Matthews
right. Yeah, for the Rocket Richard. So
with your boy, Austin
took a future because you're not going to get plus 229 any other time this year. Although he did start off a little slow so far this year, only one goal, but trust me, my man, the 60 goals are coming.
He'll be back with a vengeance.
I know. Alex, what is your best bet this week, my friend?
So best bet, John, because we've been a little bit of a hiatus as I've been traveling for work. I wanted to throw in an extra leg to the teaser to make up for not getting a best bet in for this past football week. So going back to the well with the Giants. So we teased them. They're currently sitting at +3. We're going to tease them up to +9 over the Jags. I mean, the Jags, they've been respectable now with Urban Meyer not coaching that team and Doug Peterson in with his visor and his visor energy. +9 is just too many points.
That's a lot of points in the NFL,
given how successful the Giants have been this year. So give me the Giants +9. Bungles, I never like betting on the Bungles, but they're sitting at -6, so they just have to win over the Falcons. I think they can do that. You're not supposed to tease through 0, John, but the 49ers have been really, really hurting. The Chiefs are 3-point favorites. We're gonna bring the Chiefs through 0, and we'll get that push at the key number of 3. So I think the Chiefs win that game, and so that shouldn't
I
really
like
be a
it.
problem.
I like
And
it.
then the Patriots on Monday Night Football. Whether or not Bailey Zappi plays, the Bears are just freaking inept. So the Patriots are 8-point favorites. We're going to tease them down to -2, get inside that key number. And so that I believe is plus 260 with the 4 legs on the teaser. But stand by as I double check that.
It's okay. We got this. We got this.
Yep, that is plus 260 if you take that whole teaser. So get it now before those numbers move, and you can manipulate the key numbers, especially the key number of 3. It's a little harder as you get later in the week. John, where are you going with your best bet?
So my best bet, we're going to go, despite the fact that normally back-to-backs do not end well in hockey, we're going to take the Bruins as underdogs against the Senators. The lowly Senators have started off awful this year. They thought they were going to be good, and go figure, they weren't. I mean, those of us with brains all knew they were going to suck. But that being said, I'm going to take the Boston Bruins, man. Tried and true. The Bruins have an identity. They produce players that just come out of a lab to be Bruins, and they play hard, man. And I really like them against the young Senators team that isn't going to deal with physicality well. Alex, what about your long shot or parlay? Oh, and plus 110 for that tonight. Alex, what about your long shot or parlay this week?
Yeah, I mean, old man C. Montgomery Burns running the Bruins there needs his home playoff date. So, but Bruins, hey, they're always good. They will log down enough enough regular season wins to guarantee themselves some
Hammer that 7th spot.
At least a 1 round of home playoff dates. John, we're going to a 12-leg parlay. And that's going to be across 3 sports. Now the NBA is starting again. Reminder that our NBA preview will be coming up this week. We have a few NBA games in here, but I didn't want to. I like betting the NBA more than I like betting the NFL. But you want to at least get a little bit of lay of the land before you start laying some.
I bet
but there'll be plenty
too,
of NBA best bets to come. A lot of first quarters in Denver down the road. But tonight, Celtics are playing the 76ers. I like to believe after losing the NBA Finals, the Celtics will come out and make a statement on opening night. Celtics have typically had the 76ers number, and Embiid, no Robert Williams, so Embiid could go off. But so I got the Celtics on the money line. Warriors getting their rings tonight. Let's take them on the money line over the Lakers. I'm not sold that it's kumbaya yet under the new coach out there in LA. We're going to take the Pistons on the money line against the Magic. Magic or suck. The Pistons, I think, are an ascending basketball team, and I think they'll compete for a playoff spot. We'll take the Grizzlies on the Knicks. Again, a team with something to prove. This game's at home. Grizzlies hopefully get off on the right start. Spurs are very much in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, a la like they were in the Tim Duncan sweepstakes. So they're all in for that. They've traded everyone who knew how to dribble this offseason. So let's take the Hornets over them. That game that they are on the road, but the Spurs are, Greg Popovich just said that they're openly tanking. So let's take the Nuggets.
He knows what's up, man. He knows what's up.
We're going to take the Nuggets on the money line again in Utah. Altitude is always scary, but the Nuggets are going to Utah, so I think they'll be fine there. Jokic coming off back-to-back MVPs. Utah very much in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. So that rounds out the NBA games. We're going to go App State on the money line over Georgia State for our college football. University of Texas San Antonio on the money line over North Texas. Maryland on the money line at home over Northwestern. Some Big Ten action. Alabama first half money line over Mississippi State. Alabama coming off a loss. You know that they're going to be all the pedal to the metal against Mississippi State for NFL action.
Roll Tide.
We only have 2 NFL games in this parlay. We got Packers over the Commandos. Again, Packers coming off a loss to the Jets. At home, Washington really sucks, and that's a dysfunctional outfit for sure. And Patriots on the money line of Monday Night Football. The Patriots have done enough that we know the Patriots will beat up really bad football teams, and they'll win 8 or 9 games that way. John, you got to, and sorry, altogether that's a plus 5168. And John, what's your long shot?
Ooh, so for my parlay, I'm going to go with a 4-leg. It's going to go football, basketball, hockey, soccer. So football, we're going to take the Giants on the money line versus the Jags. I'm loving the Giants right now. Brian Daboll, like we talked about, fantastic coach, really showing the value of a good coach in the NFL. I like them against the Jags. The Jags are a young team still trying to figure some things out. Like we said, I'm going to add this to our current parlay that's happening tonight, Bruins versus Senators. Also, Alex, I am with you. I think the Celtics need to make a statement. I think Jason Tatum needs to make a statement, as this is one of the contenders in the NBA in terms of Celtics versus Sixers out in the East. So I'm going to take the Celtics on the money line there. And then our last one is I am going to take Tottenham Hotspur on the money line at home against Manchester United. Despite the hot start, Eric Ten Hag's men have come in short lately. And I like the tried and true Antonio Conte method. So I'm going to take Tottenham to win this game. That 4-leg parlay across 4 sports gives us a total of plus 21.25. So that is we got two big tasty lines today, Alex.
Yes, yeah, we got a few tasty long shots, 12-legger, no doubt, no doubt whatsoever. John, as we like to say, may the odds be in your favor.
Thank you, my friend. As to you.
Oh, I thank you. Any parting words before we say goodbye, John? Just want to say on behalf of John and myself, we thank you for listening to GNASS. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at the GNASS, and you can like and subscribe on whatever platform you get your podcasts on. And also do please rate and review us if you're so inclined. It helps other people find this tremendous show. And because you love us, and or at least John.
Oh, come on, man! They love both. Let's give yourself some more credit.
I gotta grow north. I'm growing on North America. But please donate to GNASS, the podcast, on Patreon. It helps us bring the great North American sports show to all corners of this great continent. And why stop there? Because we're going to take it to the whole world. Now it's time to say goodbye, John. Any final thoughts for our lovely listening and viewing audience?
Just one, which is, well, first off, obviously, as you said, Alex, well said. Thank you. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. It really helps the algorithm. Second off, we need to find a catchy tune or phrase for sucking for Victor Wanyama. Whether it's tanking for Wanyama, we need to get something that rhymes.
I'm not that clever on the spot.
Buddy, we got some time to think about it. Don't worry. How about you, Alex?
Look, the Celtics open their season tonight. It was a really big disappointment to not win that NBA Finals when they were 5 minutes away from going up 3-1 in Game 4. I think, teams either bounce back from, blowing it on a big stage, or they crater. And given all the adversity the Celtics have gone on to this offseason, we'll talk more about this on the NBA preview show. I don't have that much confidence, but the Celtics, we lost the greatest of all time in Bill Russell this offseason. And when the Boston Celtics all-time leading scorer John Havlicek died, that was the 2019 year when Kyrie Irving let things go off the rails. And if they couldn't do it that year, and you're not going to bounce back for Bill Russell, then we got problems. So I'll leave that there. And New Hampshire's liquor stores have been known to stock extra whiskey this time of year for old Alex.
In honor of Bill, man, just get those buckets.